For those of you who are unenlightened, GOP, Grand Old Party. I think it comes from the Civil War, but we'll check with my guests today. We're going to talk politics. Now, you know I do occasionally, and I talk government, and I have people from the judiciary, religion, so we cover a wide spectrum, including animals. Remember Arthur von Wiesenberg, Animal Zone. There's a lot of strange people I have on, don't I? We're over 400 shows. Can you believe that? Over 25 years, 300 different guests. Now, the reason the difference is people like my guest today, Steve Franks, who's back for the 5th, 6th, or 7th time. Hi, Steve. How are you?
Jim, always glad to be with you.
Well, it's always enlightening, I can say that. I tell people on the show that I know that much, an inch, 5% of everything in the world. That doesn't make me an expert on anything. I'm certainly not the expert on politics that you are, but it gives me the information to ask the right questions, be a good interviewer. And I've enjoyed always your interviews, and here we go again. Politics is the only one constant about it is it changes. Is that right?
Well, first of all, the definition of an expert is somebody who's at least 50 miles from their home. So I'm a little more than 50 miles from home, so okay, I'll be an expert.
Well, there's the other definition, and it comes from the putting together the words in English. X is the unknown quantity, and you know what a spurt is. It's a drip under pressure, so you're an unknown drip under pressure.
I've been called a lot worse.
So we're going to talk about the Grand Old Party, the Republican Party, and the body politic. We'll get off into things that the Grand Old Party has nothing to do with except to have their hair burned like transgender males in high school girls' locker rooms, and as in Virginia, raping girls in their bathroom because he was transgender. I always wondered, I hate to say this, even about homosexuality. If you get excited enough to have sex with the other sex, what's happening with you? And just a lot of dangerous things happening for young women. Destroying Title IX, really, the women's rights.
Well, the whole idea is to eliminate women. That's really what this is about.
How dare they? I love them.
It's like if a female has a baby, she's not a mother, she's a birthing person. They are using language against women. The idea that men can pretend to be women, and they are pretending, that's all that is. They're pretending to be women and getting rid of women from the victory stand and making sure that they don't get the scholarships. High school girls are in there in the swim teams and soccer and other teams in hopes that part of their ability, besides academics, is sports. That'll earn them a scholarship to college, and men are going to take their place. And Title IX was supposed to protect women.
50 years ago.
So where is Joe Biden, who supported Title IX to give women the right to sports? Now he's willing to take it away and make pretend people, women, to take away the rights of women. We have quota systems, whether we like it or not, diversity, inclusivity, equity, and you have to hire a certain number of people of this ethnicity, this national heritage, this type of orientation, and they are going to be adding transgender to that you're going to be forced to have that in your company or in your home, in government. I mean, we already have people who are pretending to be men, to be women, as admirals.
Yeah.
Well, we have people that just, if you didn't know, you would think this is a 1950s comedy show when you see this on TV. And all of this is to get rid of women.
I hadn't looked at it that way.
And that's really what the bottom line is. At one point, as you remember, feminists wanted to protect the rights of women, and they should be protected. But now that they've gotten the protection of the women, now they want to get rid of them because they're women, and they want men. In fact, if they talk, you've heard the left talk about toxic masculinity. That's what this is. Leah Thompson, the man who pretends to be a woman who's a swimmer, he is a toxic masculine individual, as is Rachel Levine and all these other people who are pretending. They are toxic men trying to get rid of women. And in the old days, groups like the National Organization of Women, the ACLU, and members of Congress and the Senate would stand up to defend women. Now they're standing up to defeat women.
I'm waiting for the first girl that's going to be arrested because she took her towel in the locker room and hit him right in the penis with it. Well, you know, they pop towels at each other.
Well, of course. Yeah, that's what I don't like about locker rooms, the snapping of the towels.
Yeah.
But yeah, you're right. And what about the rights of
You notice I said she'd get arrested.
Yeah, she would. He wouldn't.
No.
Even though under the law it is considered perversion for a man to show himself to a woman. That's a criminal act. Except if you say, oh, even though I have a mustache, even though I have a beard, I'm a woman. And by the way, you mentioned Virginia and that rape of the girl. You know what happened to the man involved.
He got sent to another school and raped another girl.
Oh, better than that.
No?
He was then, after that, he went to a women's prison and raped women in the prison.
Oh,
because he was a woman. And so here you have the government sending a known rapist into a jail cell with women.
Well, I've been recently railing against the not even 1%, the less than 1% that have all these different perversions or radical beliefs and get so much publicity that people actually think they are a major part of society. You know, some of the surveys that come out that, for instance, that, you know, white policemen kill 10,000 black unarmed men a year. There's a large group in the liberal community that believes that when it's 29, and there's mitigating circumstances for almost every one of those sad deaths.
And as we do know, the vast majority of black murders is done by black people.
Oh.
And so they don't want to admit it. So is that black murderer a racist, a white supremacist? Well, if you can call Larry Elder a white man in blackface, then obviously a black man that kills another black man obviously is a white supremacist.
Yeah, and the controlling factors are not just race, it's lack of male leadership in their community, lack of fathers, and it's criminality. They're not killing him because he's black, they're killing him because they want his corner in the drug war, or they want his money. And you know, it's really a pandemic in black male society, that the number of blacks black males between 16 and 40 commit 50% of the murders in this country.
But you have to remember, historically, that wasn't the case in the black community until the mid-60s, when Lyndon Johnson...
Let me finish that, and I want to hear that. That 50% are 99% black on black.
Exactly.
That these young blacks kill each other. Go ahead.
Exactly. And all of this started by government in the mid-1960s when President Johnson passed what was called the Great Society, one of the incentives was if you're married, you don't get welfare. If there's no men in the house, you'll get welfare. So they incentivized getting rid of men from the home, which took away men as role models for the children. The children had no role models except, hey, we can get government money for free and we don't have to earn it. And so they learned that the next step from government stealing from the taxpayers was, why have the middleman of government? We'll just steal from the people.
Let's talk about the Republican Party right now. We're talking about some of the problems and issues that the media has driven out in front of us. The structure of the Republican Party is a legal structure under the state election code. There's a state party, there are county parties, and they are all dictated by the election code. Tell me, because that's really not the backbone of the party, tell me where those entities stand.
Well, first you have to understand the portions of the election code that deal with the Republican Party and the Democrat Party.
Yeah, they each have their own.
Have their own, as well as the county parties, are all developed by the parties, given to legislators to make legislation to put into the election code, and mostly is protective of the rights of a few over the many Republican, in this case Republican voters. So you have the state party, which creates every 4 years a platform. Doesn't necessarily mean that platform represents the voters in the state. It represents the controlling interest of the California Republican Party, not the principles of Republicans and conservatives. Even though, if you look at the emails coming out from the California Republican Party, they always put in, "We are conservative." Well, that's if you consider Mitt Romney a conservative or Chris Christie a conservative. They are that type of conservative.
Conservative compared to the communists
right.
in the other party. Yep.
In fact, there's a Republican assemblyman, I put Republican in quotes around the word, from Palm Springs, Greg Wallace, who has a bylaw change to get rid of traditional marriage in the Republican platform. He wants to have the Republican platform an imitation of the Democrat platform. He is a Democrat ideologically, but he's a registered Republican. And so we have people like that. But the state party collects money. How much money do you think the state party gives as a California Republican Party to candidates for Assembly, State, Senate, or Congress?
$10 million?
Zero.
Oh.
So here's how the scam works.
Well, they get hundreds of millions.
Oh, here's how the scam works. So under the election code, which is set up by these leftist Republicans, under the election code, the Assembly caucus, Republican, Senate caucus, Republican, and the congressional delegation, Republican, all have separate accounts. Those accounts fall under the accounting of the state Republican Party, making it look like the Republican Party raised that money. They raised none of it. It was raised by those three caucuses.
And so when they give it to separate
then what happens is you're running for state senate and you say, I'm the nominee, I'd like you to give $50,000 to my campaign, and the state party says, we can't give it to you because we don't have any money. You have to talk to the Senate caucus. The Senate caucus will then say to the treasurer of the CRP, give Jim $50,000 or give him $10. It's up to the caucuses. The state party has no say whatsoever over it. It's a legal fiction that the state party has money. But you have the chair of the state party for all of this, who has said in March of 2020 to George Skelton in the LA Times, and I will quote, she's advising Republican candidates in 2020 not to mention Donald Trump, to stay as far, the president, to stay as far away from him as possible.
This is when he was running for re-election.
And she was the chair
Yeah,
of his campaign. That is the frustration. So when you said to me before, I want to talk about the California Republican Party, my first response should have been, I don't talk evil of the dead, because the Republican Party does not exist. There's a bunch of leftist interest groups. The chair gets $250,000. And by the way, in the last election, we lost seats in the legislature. For that, she got a $25,000 bonus.
Well, and
for losing.
She claimed that she picked up seats, but all she was doing was rearranging the chairs on the Titanic.
But none of that money. She didn't do anything. It was the Republican National Congressional Committee that spent the money, opened the offices. There was an office opened. She opened up a California Republican Party office for all the candidates in Orange County in 2019. And I took a look at that and I said, that's strange. I don't think they did it. So I checked, and what happened was the Republican National Congressional Committee opened the office. She was just there for the opening. That was it, her physical appearance, and she took credit for something she had nothing to do with.
That's not heartening. Where is there, other than the official party, which most of us have little influence on, although it's supposed to be and is very Republic. Our Central Committee chair has appointments. Our assembly candidate or assemblyman, our congressman, our state senator in each district have appointments to the state. They're delegates to the state. Sometimes it's hard to even find people who are willing to participate. I've always said that's because it's so ineffective.
And expensive.
Yeah, oh yeah. So outside of that, what about volunteer organizations?
Well, that's the most interesting thing. As you know, Jim, I've been involved with volunteer organizations since 1960.
Yeah.
And so I've seen...
Usually ones I was too.
Probably. I think you and I were members of the San Fernando Valley Young Republicans at the same time, which met at Sportsman's Lodge down there on Ventura Boulevard. Great place, great bar in the back of the room. So I've seen the strong leadership of the California Republican Assembly, of the California Federation of Republican Women, the Young Republicans, and a few other Republican organizations in the 60s and the 70s and the 80s. By the 90s, it started teetering. Now, the California Republican Assembly is coming back. 2 years ago, they were down to approximately 26 clubs. Now they're over 60 and growing strongly, including here in Santa Barbara County. There's going to be a new CRA club. The Women's Federated doesn't exist anymore. They, 2 years ago, a year and a half ago, they had 112 clubs. Those clubs that adhere to the Women's Federated is down to 20 or under, but there's a new organization that's been formed of the other clubs that's going to be very strong. And
well, it frequently happens, and it's happened in this county for a while. The Conservative Club wasn't associated with the California Republican Assembly. We have a women's Republican club that isn't associated with anybody except gals in Santa Barbara County.
Right.
And so the statewide communication has broken down.
Well, it's not the communication that has broken down. Trust between the local clubs and the state organizations. That's what happened to CRA. It had a long period of time, unfortunately, of about 8 to 10 years, where there was no trust between the clubs and the dictates of the state organization. The Women's Federated, I'll give you a great example. In October of 21, there was a statewide California Federation of Republican Women convention. I believe it was held in Pomona. And the president of the Palm Springs Women's Federated wanted to take the microphone to express her disagreement. This goes back to something we discussed before, allowing a man to be president of a women's fed club. So instead of the president of the state group saying, "What's your point? Let's hear it," she said, "Sit down and shut up. We've made the decision." So this lady took her 1,200 member club out of the Federation. 2 years later, almost 2 years later, they now have 2,000 members. And that's the type of arrogance that the left has within the Republican Party. They are as bad as any cancel culture on a campus. They don't want you to hear. This Saturday, there's going to be an executive committee meeting of the State Republican Party. State Republican Party has approximately 1,400 members, a little over. There's
Delegates.
Delegates. And the executive committee has 100 members.
How many?
100.
Yeah.
And the 100 number is in the bylaws.
Right.
It can't be more than 100. As I understand it, from looking at the list of members of that committee, in which I am one, there are exactly 100. So they meet the requirements of the state bylaws. What's the purpose of the meeting? To steal delegates from Trump in the primary of March of 24 here in California, to divide the vote up. So you don't have 100 people making such momentous decisions for 1,400 people. You take it to the convention.
Right.
They refuse to do that. And so that's the type of arrogance this so-called leadership has. They act like a bunch of Democrats.
Well, I served for a year on the executive committee because I was the chairman of the state Young Republicans. That's how far back it goes. So of that 100 people, there are leaders of volunteer organizations. I don't know exactly all the offices that are elected at the convention. And we were very tolerant and very conservative. But we were glad to see, for instance, the log cabin Republicans wanting to be chartered and starting up. That's the gay Republicans. And we were very open. I have heard that there's now more control and less tolerance for certain, well, let's be blunt, the real conservative candidates and groups.
Well, let me explain. The state party has the right to endorse candidates for legislative office,
Right.
based on the central committees in that district saying, yes, this is who we want to endorse.
Right.
Once they endorse Jim for state assembly, the chair of the Santa Barbara, it's all in Santa Barbara County, sends a notice to the chair, Jessica Patterson. We have endorsed Jim for assembly in whatever the district number is.
That's a hypothetical, by the way.
Oh, okay. Yeah, well, we're going to try to talk them into no. And so that's one way to get endorsed. The second way is if you're not endorsed, but you get the nomination anyway, you are automatically endorsed by the state party. So what happened in the last two cycles, people who were nominated, though not endorsed in the primary, but nominated by the Republican voters in their district, the state party told you, we are going to take away your endorsement. Now, they will not tell you why, except you are then forced to go to a meeting in Sacramento. You are then forced to stand up there. The moment you stand up at the podium, you have 3 minutes to read the charges against you and to answer them, and obviously you have no chance to bring in witnesses or documents to prove they're lying.
We're only blessed by the fact
And everyone is a conservative.
Yeah,
that they've done that
we're
to.
only blessed by the fact that the Democrats are as vicious to each other in their state party.
Well, I am of the. I know before we went on, came on here, you made mention that there's here in Santa Barbara County, this county's party is doing, in conjunction with the state party, a great deal of training. That's super. My belief is that these people like Jessica took their training from the Democrat Party because they're not acting like legitimate Republicans.
I don't want to accuse her of any underhandedness, but there is a company called Trailblazers, and it does training. And my understanding, now I haven't gone to the corporate records and everything, but everybody I've talked to doesn't deny it, that she owns that corporation.
So here's the story.
Okay.
Trailblazers.
Prove me wrong.
I will. Trailblazers was founded in 2012 by Charles Munger, the purpose of which was to take over the Republican Party and its nominees.
Now, so is this Charles that lived in San Jose, not his father who lived in Montecito?
That's correct.
Okay.
This is the bad Munger, not the good Munger. Anyway, so he hired an executive director at $125,000 a year to put on some training sessions. Jessica Patterson. So
that was 20 years ago?
No, 2012, 2014 when this all started. So you are thinking of running for the assembly, and they will invite you up there, along with all these other candidates around the state, and they will start one-on-one. Hey, Jim, what is your views on the life? Do you consider yourself a Christian? What are your views on the Second Amendment? Do you think, what do you think of traditional marriage? If we told you to vote for something or endorse somebody, would you do it automatically? And so what they did was they used these meetings for the purpose of sorting out Republicans and conservatives to people who are puppets and Democrats.
So they would have objected when I said under the Second Amendment we should issue a gun to every sober male or female in the country?
They would melt down with that answer. And so she becomes chair. She can't do the Trailblazers thing. So what does she do? She incorporates the corporation, California Trailblazers, into the California Republican Party. The party now owns the Trailblazers. So it doesn't have to make financial reports separate like it did under the Trailblazers when Munger owned it.
Well, what's going to happen to it when she is finally gone?
Good question. They will continue the thought of it. If they control the chairmanship, they will continue to control the nominees by making sure. So, Jim, you're in the 35th district, running for the assembly. You're the only candidate, and you go up here, and they find out you're a Republican. They will then find somebody to run against you and finance him against you to defeat you.
The state party?
State party. Well, they will arrange for stuff. First of all, they'll get the endorsement process to endorse against you, and then they have backers who don't like Republicans, and so they'll donate.
Well, we're being involved at the local level. We are very structured in the way we, for instance, endorsements. An endorsement requires 2/3 of the members of the Central Committee voting. That's always a good trick. You don't want to vote for Donald Trump? Abstain, please. And that lowers the threshold of 2/3. And so you can, it's parliamentary procedure. And by the way, we haven't endorsed in the presidential race yet, sadly to say. But we'll talk about that next. So you're saying that the state party works for the interests of the elite in the state party, and now where does corporate money fit into that? Oil companies, Boeing, industrial companies.
Well, remember what I said earlier, the party gets no money. It goes into those three caucuses, Assembly, State Senate, and delegation, the congressional delegation. Those three. That's really where the money goes to, because they have such a high overhead when you have your chair, and this was from a year ago, the chair earns $250,000. There's 7 other people earn a minimum of $150,000 a year. They have a headquarters to maintain and all the travel and stuff, and we're putting on conventions and all. They have a very high bill, of course, for data, which they have to have, and for websites and emails and all that. So all the money goes to that. So the corporate people give to the Assembly, State Senate, and delegation. And how do they do that? So I was on the phone a few days ago, and apparently a couple of weeks ago, there was a golf tournament, not a golf tournament, a golf event up at Pebble Beach, where they brought in all the donors. And they do up north. Then there's
Torrey Pines.
This was Pebble Beach itself.
Right, I meant south.
And then in the south, somewhere in Palm Springs area, is where they normally, for years, have held the Southern California donors. And they raise a good deal of money, but that money is given to the caucuses, divided. They have a program called One Ask. So you're a corporation, and I'm Jessica, and you've agreed to give me $10,000. Well, under the One Ask, the state party will get, as I understand it, and each 2 years they change the agreement slightly, but normally the agreement is the state party will get 25% of that $10,000, Assembly caucus gets 25%, Senate caucus gets it 25%, and then they work it out so that the congressional delegation gets their 25%.
I really misunderstood this. I thought that the state party could get money from Boeing and Google.
They could, but that's not how it works. They have this program called One Ask.
So if I'm the CEO of Vizek, when he was not running for president, when he had his technology company. So if he said, I want to give $1 million to the Republican Party, it wouldn't go to the party?
Not all of it, no. A portion will, approximately to about 25%, and the other 75% will be divided about equally. And it changes slightly for some reason. Every 2 years, there's a written agreement between all 4 entities, the CRP, the Assembly Caucus, Senate Caucus, and the delegation. But it's basically about 25%. And so $250,000 of that would go to the state party, $250,000 to the Assembly. But they're not getting that type of money anymore because corporations, because the Democrats have such a supermajority, doesn't matter whether you donate to a Republican or not.
But also, I've dealt with donors in that class. They want to see exactly where their money's going. They don't want it to go into the Assembly caucus, the Senate caucus. They want to see a body that says, here's how we're going to spend your $1 million.
Well, unfortunately, that's the way it is today. They don't get. And so the state party, you're right, on the major donors, that's how it works. One ask, it's divided. The small donors is pathetic. And here's what happens. And in the last few years, Jessica's become an expert at this. I bet, Jim, you support school choice. And you see this email saying, parent revolt, we need school choice. Give it to us. Give us money so we could do this. Where do you think the money goes? It goes to the general fund of the state party. Not a dime was spent on school choice. When we had the Newsom recall, the RNC gave a large amount of money to the CRP to help the recall. And Jessica didn't want to give a dime to the recall.
The money from the federal
The Republican National Committee
went to the
gave a
state
large-
party
right.
for recall, and Jessica
Right.
didn't use it.
She didn't, and then it became a scandal, and people in support of the recall of Newsom made a big deal out of it, and they were forced, as I remember, it was $250,000. So she gave $125,000 to the recall and kept $125,000 for the CRP, which did nothing with it. Election integrity. We need honest elections. So give money. We're doing it. The state party has refused, I use that word specifically, refused to sue to get dead people off the voting rolls in California. Refused to sue to get people who've lived for 10 years in Texas who are still getting California ballots to get them off the voting rolls, but they are using the money for the overhead of the party.
Well, and we have a federal court ruling to do those things. You're saying that the party isn't going and enforcing it.
That's correct. Not only aren't they going to enforce it, they try to steal money by taking money for those causes from groups that are like Election Integrity Project CA that are actually doing the work. And so they're confusing donors, and money that belongs to the cause of election integrity is being stolen for the overhead of the state party.
Okay, Trump DeSantis, definitely going to be in California. I'm sure Vizek is going to be on the ballot. Who knows how many of our 14 candidates will spend the money to come on the ballot. How are the proposals to develop to give the 150 some delegates California will have at the Republican convention?
Well, the law is, as of today, that it's winner take all by congressional district. So if a candidate
2020
wins,
law.
right. But now they tried to really steal delegates, so they provided a new bylaw for March of 2024 that if you get 90% of the vote in this congressional district, and the second place person gets 6% of the vote, the 90% gets 2 delegates, and the 6% gets 1.
Yeah, there's three per congressional district. Yeah.
When it came up at the Rules Committee, after a lot of embarrassment to the people who supported it, they withdrew that, and now the new proposal is if you win 50% plus 1 statewide, you get all the delegates. Mm-hmm. Okay? But if you get 49.1% of the vote, you get 49% of the delegates, and everybody else gets a percentage of delegates based on the percentage of votes you got. All of this is to ensure that there is I call it a hung jury, but that the national party is unable on the first ballot to select a candidate. Mm-hmm. I don't believe that's going to happen. It hasn't happened in over 100 years. I think that Trump is too far ahead. The Democrats, in fact, are doing all they can to make sure he wins the nomination.
So many states have a rule, the basis of it is 15%. The popular vote, any candidate achieving 15%, then the rest of it will be divided proportionally based upon the vote. But that's a pretty high threshold.
So what's going to be done on Saturday is there's going to be an amendment to the Rules Committee recommendation to have a 20%
threshold
floor. You have to get 20% to get any delegates from California. And one of the other things we're going to do is we're going to demand, remember we talked before, there's 100.
But that's statewide.
Right,
You're
right.
not going to go congressional district.
No.
So
remember before I said there's 100 members. We predict there'll be about 80 of those 100 actually present, because some of them are out of country. I know a couple who are going to be out of country. Some legislators don't want to be within a country mile of this because of the controversy. So we'll wind up plus or minus 80 actual people there. And we're going to ask for a roll call vote. So everybody is on record. But there's a second part to this. We also want the convention to make a determination, not these 100 people or 80 that show up. So we're going to have
in September.
In September. So there will be a motion made to postpone this vote on the Rules Committee recommendation until the September convention.
Are you for that?
I'm making the motion. And
You and I always have this question, and you're usually good, better than the average bear. Do you have the votes?
well, we're also going to ask for a roll call vote on that, because we want, and I'm going to announce, we want to know, those of you who represent yourselves and candidates for president, and those who represent the delegates to the California Republican Party. We want to separate you. We want everybody to know who you represent. So we're going to have a roll call vote. And the reason I could say it on your show now is by the time people start seeing this show, Saturday will be over, and then the secret's out.
Yeah. I don't think we'll make Friday night. We'll start Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday at 2 o'clock. By the way, I didn't say that. And then Friday again at 7. But it will probably go on the internet before.
That's okay. They have to, if they were game playing this, as we are, they have to know that's the road you take.
Yeah. So if the election were held today in California, what, 5 or 6 candidates would pay to file and get on the ballot?
Here's the problem with that. Filing actually opens on September 29th, I believe it is, closes on December 12th.
Right.
I'm sorry, December 8th. And so they're going to have to make a decision before the Iowa caucuses and all this other stuff.
Right.
And so we don't know how many will make it. I will presume 10 will try it, will get their name on the ballot, because it doesn't take much to get on the ballot.
Well, that could be a boon to the Republican Party, because that's the only race besides our Central Committee. We have to run at that time for re-election every 4 years. I got to get 40 people to sign in my supervisorial district that they want me to be on the ballot. Not they'll vote for me. In fact, I tell them, you probably won't vote for me, but please get me on the ballot. That a large, diverse Republican candidacy, when it's the only place other than the central committees that is closed to only Republicans.
Right.
It's not like the Senate where it's top 2 or most congressional races.
Right.
It's, you've got to be a Republican registered voter to vote in the presidency.
Right.
Will that benefit the growth of the party?
No.
Why? I was hoping.
The people who care will already come out no matter what. Whether it's Trump and 2 other people or Trump and 10 other people, they will come out because they love Trump or they hate Trump. And I don't see the people in the middle deciding, I got to vote in the Republican primary.
Now, our primary will be part of Super Tuesday, right?
Correct.
So there will have only been a couple of caucuses like Ohio and
You have
Nevada.
You have New Hampshire, South Carolina, Iowa.
Yeah, but some of those will be primaries, won't they?
Well, Iowa's a caucus.
Yeah.
The others, I believe, are primaries.
Yeah.
I think Iowa may be the only state that still
Nevada's kind of mixed.
Yeah, they sometimes have a caucus and sometimes they have a statewide vote.
And Utah is mixed always. So.
Yeah, well, not a lot of delegates come out of Nevada or Utah. But I think we're going to start seeing more in 2032 when we have the next reapportionment, because California is losing population. All these other states, all these red states, from South Carolina to Georgia to Florida to Texas, Iowa, South Dakota, North Dakota, Idaho, they're all gaining Republicans, people who are fleeing California.
Yeah, what people are already saying,
we're
losing 2 congressional seats. I wouldn't be surprised if we lost 4.
Well, we will lose 2, and it is possible that we will lose 4. We should have lost 2 this time, and they manipulated the numbers to make it only 1, but we deserve to lose 2. And there was a lawsuit, and the judges said, we can handle it.
The lawsuit saying that
another state asked for another member of Congress because California had one that they didn't deserve, and the courts ruled we can't decide this.
And sadly, a lawsuit that should work, removing non-legal aliens from the apportionment of our congressional districts, that'll never happen.
At this point it won't, but if the Republicans take over the Senate and the House and the White House, it will happen.
Well, we've got a few more minutes. Your prediction for the presidency?
There's talk these days that DeSantis is losing steam and momentum, and some people are calling him the 224 version of Jeb Bush.
Oh, I hope not.
Well, that's what they're calling him.
Yeah.
But I remember in 2007, John McCain was running for the presidency, and there was a great picture of him getting off a plane, carrying his own suits on his back, no staff people. He had fired almost every member of his staff. It was just him running around the country. And he was dead. But he came back and became the nominee. So just because you're down today, in 2015, on the 1st of July of 2015, which was about 2 weeks after Trump got into the election, he was at 1% in the polls. So things do change, and it's difficult to say that DeSantis is out. I do believe, and here's a scoop for you that you may not see in the media because they don't want to publish it. There is a PAC that raised $120 million for DeSantis,
right.
The super PAC. Guess what they're doing? They're now having conversations with Governor Youngkin of Virginia and Senator Scott of South Carolina, switching from DeSantis to one of them.
Oh.
And so
and yet they raise the money in DeSantis' name.
Right. But the bottom line to all this, that proves they were not pro-DeSantis. Mm-hmm. They were anti-Trump. And that's what this is about. And so that is watching them if they go through with it, and I believe they'll go with Scott of South Carolina. If they go with him, because I don't think Youngkin's going to run for president.
No.
I think he's going to wait to run for the Senate, U.S. Senate, when his term as governor is over. But if they go with Scott, that will end DeSantis, and it will expose the anti-Trump attitude of this super PAC run by a political consultant. I won't mention his name as Jeff Rowe.
Yeah. At least he isn't the Lincoln Club.
Well, actually, that PAC has hired people here in California, allegedly, to help DeSantis. And you look at the people they hired, I know every one of them, they're all anti-Trump people. Not pro-DeSantis. They are anti-Trump. And it just looked funny to me, and I just, what is going on here? And because there were pro-DeSantis people that wanted to work for DeSantis, they couldn't get hired. So what happened was the anti-DeSantis PAC, the anti-Trump PAC, made a determination, we're going to hire anti-Trump people. And so if we have to switch, there's no problem.
Well, the people you're talking about who are so anti-Trump that they have blinders on are sort of like the kamikaze pilots. They're willing to crash and burn. They just, they don't see, they don't realize that there's, I would say, 40% of definitely the Republicans, but I think 40% of the country is solidly Trump. And so the battle's for the next 15%.
Not 15%, because it's obvious now that Cornel West is going to be on the ballot in 15 to 20 states. Many of them
15 to 20.
15 to 20 states. And on some of those states, those are swing states, that he could do what Ralph Nader did years ago, what Perot had done to Bush, that he could swing it. Then you have Joe Manchin, who knows what he's going to do. He's certainly not going to be supporting Biden, and there's going to be a lot of division on the other side.
That's a no-name group, the Manchin and the kind of
no labels.
No
labels.
And the former governor of Utah,
Huntsman, who was anti-Trump.
Yeah, and yet Trump sent to Japan as his ambassador.
Yeah, Trump tried to make nice with bad people, and he forgot his own lesson.
Yeah. You
don't make nice with bad people.
Yeah.
They're not nice.
Well, you can be nice once you have your foot on their throat.
Yeah. Yeah.
You don't have to crush them. California, we have an interesting situation. We're down to the last 5 minutes, except for the Republican nominee and things within the Republican Party. We have what's called a jungle primary. Top two. We can thank our former Santa Barbara Lieutenant Governor Abel Maldonado for it. It looked good at the time because it worked in Louisiana, but it's never worked in California.
Well, Louisiana worked because it was such a strong Republican state. It didn't matter. California was a swing state, and you needed
it swung the other way.
You needed to have the definition between Republican and Democrat, and by doing it Abel's way, it ended the Republican Party in California.
Yeah, and it certainly wasn't his intent. Now, there are three, and really, I can identify for you reasonable Democrat congressmen around the state, but there are three crazies, far leftist, Marxist type of, two are Marxist type of congresswomen, and then there's the real crazy Schiff, who has been everything but indicted by Durham for his lies about Russiagate and his coming out of the Schiff, where they have their secret documents telling the media what was in it, and it wasn't. It was untrue, and that's all been documented by a independent counsel. There's only one right now real Republican who has stepped up, and that's Eric Early. And we have great love for him here in Santa Barbara because he led the lawsuit pro bono to end critical race theory in our schools. He is unliked by Jessica and the state committee. leadership is who's going to be our Republican candidate to get into that top two?
Well, it's difficult to say that a Republican will get into the top two. The Democrats have 4 major candidates, the 3 you named. By the way, you may want to get new mugs. There's a new mug that you can get. It says, "Give California shift." He's putting it out. He's making money off of that. T-shirts and everything.
2.5 minutes.
And so Eric has the support of the grassroots around the state. He's a known quantity. He has ID statewide because of his previous
So
arrests.
why wouldn't he be against one of the Democrats?
Because he doesn't have the money. All you have to do, I'm not giving any state secrets, just look at his FEC report.
Right.
It's public record. And the Democrats, they're going to have, I don't believe that Biden is going to be on the ballot. I believe he's not president on Labor Day 2023. I think he's gone in a month, a little over a month. And the Democrats will have one heck of a hot primary for president. And the Democrats will also have a hot primary for the Senate. But at the other hand, the Republicans, I think Trump wins by at least 60% of the vote in California. It's not going to be a hot race. No one's going to care about the Republican Senate race because no one believes a Republican can win that seat. So they're not going to come out for the presidential election or the senatorial election.
Well, you're talking about the primary and
right,
all
the
this,
primary.
yeah.
So that gives the Democrats, the 4th candidate, which you haven't mentioned, is a Silicon Valley very wealthy woman. Her last name is Renzi, and is getting a lot of progressive support and female support. Real female support, not the pretend type.
White female. There's
Yeah,
2 black females.
The biological
Yeah.
females. And so...
So you're predicting it's going to be 2 Democrats?
At this moment, it looks like it'll be 2 Democrats because the Republican Party is not geared up.
Well, we got to get Eric early there, so
Yep.
there's a choice.
Sure.
And the miracles happen in that kind of choice. Who knows what the country will be like? I tell people it's possible that Donald Trump can win with 55 to 58% of the vote in the general election. I know I'm crazy.
It is possible. It's going to be a very, hold on to your seat, make sure you have a seat belt. It's going to be a rocky road.
You'll be back before we get there.
You got
Thank
it.
you.
Okay.